Following the events at home, the Abbott family now face the terrors of the outside world. Forced to venture into the unknown, they realize the aliens are not the only threats lurking beyond the sand path. On a technical level, A Quiet Place Part 2 is excellently made with creativity driving every scenario, but unfortunately lacking everywhere else, especially in the places that matter most. This movie, which on the surface is a tense and often effective ride, gets dragged down by the thinness of its story and its world building. Also the actions of the characters, who do everything possible to put themselves in danger. As with much of the backstory in the film, the reveal of the invasion's first day doesn't really offer any context for the events. At times, this movie feels aimless, and the narrative also becomes wholly bland and more interested in explaining more about the aliens instead of exploring its characters. The movie is not interested in answering the questions of how do you wrestle with the absence of a father figure, or even exploring their dimensions. It's emotionally discontinuous storytelling, and the film is all the weaker for it. Transitioning the horror elements to something more action-oriented is fine, but the filmmaker's meticulous crafting can only take the experience so far before it begins to feel like a diminishing returns of the same thing. The parallel story structure the film adopts goes to occasionally embarrassing lengths to create synchronicity between its dueling timelines. Toss in the sloppy final act that feels like a skeleton of a story, and you're left with something more along the lines of a confounding place. With a mix of bewildering character decisions and contrived plotting that banks on cheap tricks, any interest in this expanding universe dissipates by the film's final moments. The sequel also underutilizes the clear hurdles it proposes. Abbott explains how the outside world is not worth saving because those who remain are now sinister, but we only receive a glimpse of such deadly tidings, considering the air-gasping opening third, set in an idyllic town, to not demonstrate how exactly the humans in this present-day world have changed feels like a massive missed opportunity. Reagan is keen to take over the role of patriarch and lead the family to safety, and the film teases this intriguing notion a few times, only to have Abbott step in and save the day and her return to the role of youthful damsel. It's a shame, as the character is the ace that is kept up the film's sleeve. Her expressiveness and charisma nudge to the film's fringes, particularly in its disappointing second half. Without much into detail, there is a tense centerpiece action sequence cross-cutting between characters fighting and surviving, subsequently heading in a multitude of bizarre directions that feel either underwritten or drastically chopped for time. When everything is a high-wire act built on rushed decisions, it leaves little room to feel for this family, particularly when the film's main arc is meant to be about children growing up and making their own way in life. The story itself takes predictable and contrived turns, but without the novelty of the premise to paper over the story's flaws like it did in the first movie, this sequel cannot quite overcome the weaknesses of the narrative or the world that it tries to build. Instead, it bounces predictably from one shock sequence to the next, while introducing new elements to the story and then moving on without fully exploring them. Overall, it's admirable that the filmmakers decided to stay relatively small scale with the sequel, but in carrying over the narrow scope, the narrative hangs up of the first outing are only expounded upon here, with a rinse and repeat blueprint to the stakes that feels all too repetitive. This movie is underwhelming.